Welcome to our Tuesday morning devotional. It's in the new year, and so if you have taken on reading the Bible as your New Year challenge, good job. Keep up with it. If you are interested in reading along with our daily devotional, you can find it on our website, fivelakes.church/daily devotions. And there's some notes there if you're new to reading the Bible about how to go about it using what we call the SOAP method. You can read that on our website. And my encouragement to you is to just stick with it. Keep reading the Bible, and God will be teaching you and showing you something new each day, as he did with the story that we're going to read today. And that comes from Luke 10, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. And even if you've never read the Bible before, my guess is that you've probably heard this story before, but just in case you haven't, we'll just review the story a little bit. It's the story of the Good Samaritan, and it's a young Jewish lawyer asks Jesus a question. He says, "What must I do to be saved?" And that's a great question, right? What must I do? And so Jesus, in typical Jesus fashion, answers his question with a question. He says, "Well, how do you read it? How do you read Scripture?" And the young man replies, "Well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. These two things sum up the law." And Jesus says, "You've answered correctly." Well, the young lawyer wants to justify his own actions, and so he says to Jesus, "Yes, but who is my neighbor?" And so Jesus answers this question with a story, as he often does. And so the story goes like this, that there was a man who was going through a dangerous pass, and he was beaten, robbed, and basically left for dead. And he was lying alongside the road, needing help. And so the story goes on to tell that first a priest came by, and the priest didn't respond. He walked the opposite side of the road. And then it says that a temple assistant went by, and he went on the opposite side of the road and didn't help the man. But then a Samaritan, someone we wouldn't expect, actually stops and helps the man. He bandages his wounds. He helps him up. He lifts him onto his donkey, camel, whatever he would have been riding in those days. He takes him into town. He takes him to an inn. He spends the night with him, caring for the man. And then he pays the innkeeper some money to say, "Continue to take care of this man. And when I come back through town, I'll pay you anything that is owed to continue to take care of this man." He goes beyond what we would expect. So the young Jewish lawyer walks away because what God has called him to is something that seems impossible. What Jesus is saying here is we are being called to live a life that looks so different than that around us. And if we kind of put it in the bigger scheme of what Jesus is teaching, if we think about the Sermon on the Mount, right? Jesus says, well, you read the law and it says don't murder, but I'm going to tell you that murder starts in your thoughts. When we're angry with our brothers, that's where murder starts. And so Jesus encourages us to live a life where we don't speak badly about our brothers and sisters. And he says that, the law says don't commit adultery, but he says, I encourage you, don't look at someone lustfully. So this story goes along with what we would expect from Jesus, that he's calling us to a higher level. I think the difference between living in the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So the letter of the law says don't murder, but the spirit is don't even have murderous thoughts. The letter of the law says don't commit adultery, and the spirit of the law says don't have adulterous thoughts. So here when we're talking about the Good Samaritan, we're saying to love your neighbor, but the spirit of the law is be willing to go the distance, to go the extra mile, to go beyond what someone would expect. Well, this whole story came to light for me where literally today we have someone who needed assistance with a motel for a few nights so they could get into a new apartment. And I had this moment where I was like, I just am going to do this all online, and there's no reason that I should have to go over there. When the story of the Good Samaritan hit me, and I realized that God is calling us to be inconvenienced, to go out of our way, to go the extra mile, to show love to our actual neighbor. And in a way, this feels impossible, right? How could anyone live like this? How could anyone not put boundaries on what they give and the amount of time that they're going to spend or go out of their way? And yet those places are where we really enter the God zone, because with God, anything is possible. Is it possible for me to give without limits? No, it's not. But with God, if I can trust him, then I'm able to give what God has enabled me to give, what He knows in advance that I am able to give. Can I always rearrange my schedule to help another person? It doesn't seem possible, and yet with God, all things are possible. I've seen Him numerous times open up my schedule when I thought that I had no break in the day and give me a gift of an expanse of time. Maybe things didn't take as long as I thought, or a meeting got canceled. And I encourage you that when you have the opportunity in front of you to respond to a need, be willing to be inconvenienced, to be willing to go out of your way. An opportunity to love our neighbor rarely comes at a convenient time. Opportunities are rarely at opportune moments. So our encouragement from our passage today is to live a life that is distinguished from others around us. Don't be that person that's too busy. Don't be that person who's living the letter of the law, but instead to live out the spirit of the law. I think the first law helps us to do that, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Only when we do that, when we place God first and we put our priority on God, our eyes to heaven, can we truly live in the way that He has called us to do. And so I pray that today, as you go about your day, you would recognize opportunities to be the hands and feet of Christ, that you would embrace those opportunities to become uncomfortable, because that is where you're going to find your growth in your faith, and you're going to see God come through in ways that you can't even think to ask or imagine. And so that's my encouragement for you today. And as you go forth today, I just pray that these things would become a reality in your life and that your faith would grow. Thanks for joining us today.